Should we embrace or reject developing AI technology? With tech legends Elon Musk and Steve Wozniak among thousands calling for an immediate pause in AI development, how worried should we be about the potential dangers of artificial intelligence? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is the call to halt AI technology. Well, for decades, AI has been a source of both fascination and fear over how it might transform our lives. The recent release of the newest version of ChatGPT has some tech leaders worried it's all moving way too fast. Twitter CEO Elon Musk and thousands of others have signed an open letter calling for a 6-month ban on the dangerous race to make artificial intelligence as advanced as humans. The letter urges tech companies to immediately suspend their efforts to create a system that's even more powerful. Here's what you should know about ChatGPT 4.
The new version of ChatGPT can solve problems with better accuracy and has more advanced reasoning capabilities. OpenAI says GPT-4 is 40% more likely to produce factual responses. It can even pass the bar exam with a score in the 90th percentile. And in the biology Olympiad, its performance is in the top 1%. GPT-4 is also able to handle 25,000 words, 8 times higher than the previous version. This allows the chatbot to create extended conversations and analysis, and it can work with more than just text. The upgraded version analyzes images and integrates them into conversation. For example, it can give you meal suggestions based on a photo from inside your fridge.
Well, explained like that, ChatGPT 4 sounds like a high-tech dream. But Elon Musk himself has said not to be fooled, and that this technology could be highly risky.
I think we need to regulate AI safety, frankly, because if you think of any technology which is potentially a risk to people, like if it's aircraft or cars or medicine, we have regulatory bodies that oversee the public safety of cars and planes and medicine, and I think we should have a similar sort of regulatory oversight for artificial intelligence.
So while Musk and others call to temporarily halt AI development for safety's sake, Microsoft founder Bill Gates says a pause is just impractical.
Every example they give of a specific thing it doesn't do, wait a few months, and it's very good. So characterizing how good it is, the people who say it's crummy are really wrong, and the people who think this is AGI, they're wrong, and those of us in the middle are just, trying to make sure it gets applied in the right way. There's
Correct.
a lot of activities like, helping somebody with their college application. What's my next step? What haven't I done? I have the following symptoms that are, in fact, far within the boundary of things that it can do quite effectively.
Well, let's hear directly now from one of the signatories of that open letter. And joining me from Paris is Nico Miyai. He is co-founder of the Future Society. It's an NGO focused on aligning AI through better governance. Thanks so much for being with us. And Nico, explain your primary fear here with AI technology speeding ahead. And how would, a 6-month pause in its development help allay that fear?
Well, thanks for having me, Andrea. And I think that one thing that one should understand very clearly is the speciality of the current techno-scientific cocktail that is put on the table with these GPT-4 general-purpose AI systems. They are powerful, but still totally uninterpretable black boxes. So we're talking about algorithms that are capable of exhibiting language, vision, and an increasing set of cognitive function, including reasoning, but that we cannot understand. that the designers of which do not understand the way in which they operate. So they are powerful, and in so many tasks, they perform above human level. They can be deployed across our digital economy, doing search engine, doing generation of many emails, and in so doing, so we are building a powerful aircraft and deploying this aircraft in function across social media, across a number of functions, but we don't understand them and they are powerful. And that lack of interpretability creates a number of risks. We have seen how algorithms have been manipulated in the past to create disinformation. Now these systems can code. So we can face the risk of very structured cyber attacks with this kind of algorithms. And the combination between powerfulness, general purposeness, and this black box notion creates the question and drives the need for a pause in a way.
It's fascinating. I mean, I've heard misinformation mentioned over and over. So I want to go through a few of the points in the letter, starting with, should we let machines flood our information channels with propaganda and untruth? But let me ask, don't humans do that now anyway? And aren't we getting better as humans at questioning what we read?
Yes.
Won't we understand that that's what will be happening potentially with more AI?
Yes, I agree. Note that these systems are generative in nature. They can generate loads of text and images that look like very human generated language and text. And the risk here with disinformation is that we are going to let powerful systems proliferate in generating things that at times are not evidenced, resemble hallucinations. So the risk is of unleashing a wave of generated language, images, videos in a way that we cannot control and that are not always truthful. That's this proliferation, that's the velocity and the scale at which this system are capable of generating these outputs in a way that look like they're human generated. And we cannot tell the difference. Not that we have passed the Turing test without even realizing it.
Yeah. You know, it's fascinating because you made a specific point about videos, and we've talked before about deep fakes. I think that is visually what people can imagine would be very scary, because it is really getting more and more difficult to discern which images we see are doctored, which are not. And that could get really confusing beyond what just information is put out there. But let me go to another point in this letter. You said, should we automate all the jobs away, including the fulfilling ones? Again, haven't we always automated away our jobs to make our work more efficient?
We have, but again, it's the question of the scale and the velocity at this is moving. So we've been talking about this creative destruction for a long time. But here again, just take this example. Less than 2 years ago, if you were discussing at the OECD, we were thinking that so-called creative skills were to be protected for the next 10 years. And what was going to be replaced was more mundane cognitive skills like data classification. With generative AI, doing text, image, and now video, it turns out that these creative skills are now the front line. This has shifted quite tremendously in the span of 2 years. This lack of predictability, this volatility is really creating a problem in terms of planning for the future of work, because you know that our institutions take decades to adjust. So we need to accelerate the governance leapfrog to ensure that we accelerate the ability of our institutions to adjust. This is the challenge, hence the pause.
Yeah, I mean, governance and legislation always seems to be a big step behind technology. But okay, one last point in this letter. You said, should we develop non-human minds that might eventually outnumber, outsmart, obsolete, and replace us? And should we risk the loss of control of our own civilization? One argument counter to that, though, is if these creators of AI gave it life, they can take that life away too.
We hope that, and part of what the AI control and AI alignment governance question is about creating fail switch, red button to turn off systems when they lose control. Remember that the revolution that we are going through has the systems exhibiting more and more general purpose abilities.
Okay. Now here's a question, I think, from the real proponents of AI and thinking that certain companies and countries deserve to be ahead in this game.
When you look at the reality of the market dynamics right now, we have got several American companies and several British companies racing one against the other. It seems to quote the Chinese, for example, that they are far behind. And it seems that the sanctions that they have been hit with in terms of access to semiconductors, for example, are leading them to slow down. So we need to look at the current market dynamics, and for sure, the response to the need that you have expressed in your comments is the need to build an international regulation and governance, and to start with so-called like-minded countries. And this is what is happening in the transatlantic collaboration. This is what is happening with the Global Partnership on AI, which brings 30 countries. This is not perfect, but that's the way to go.
Okay, Nico Miyai, really great to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us on this segment of the Newsmakers. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So if certain creators of AI don't quite trust the technology, how should we feel about it? Joining me now to debate that are from Washington, Alexandra Seymour. She's an associate fellow for the Technology and National Security Program at the Center for a New American Security. And from Perth, Australia, Alex Jenkins, director of the WA Data Science Innovation Hub at Curtin University. Thanks both so much for being with us. I'd like to pick up on what our last guest actually was saying about how it's important for countries to cooperate, to align and control this, he called it reckless race in AI technology. Alexandra, does it make sense to ask governments on the national and international level to halt development until more testing is done?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. So I don't think that it does make sense to ask them to halt in terms of development. And here is why specifically. For something like a 6-month pause, that's not going to be enough time to be able to achieve the safety protocols that those who sign the letter are seeking to see. Now, it does, we should be encouraging governments to work together. This is something that they've already started to do, and these have been ongoing conversations at the international level to work on AI standards development. There have been a lot of robust conversations about ethics. Now we're starting to see a lot more of those go over to the military space. But at the end of the day, some of the things that we need to do are to continue to invest in building these technologies. The only way that we're going to find some of these vulnerabilities is if we actually deploy them and are able to go back and to fix some of the things that we find.
Okay, I mean, I guess the fear, especially for those who signed on to that letter, is that, you know, if you release it and then figure out the problems later, it's just too late. This could get out of control. So let me ask Alex, I mean, what's the worst that could happen?
Look, I think there's a very serious risk into the future. We're not there yet, where these AIs are controlled by a very small number of people. And these people have inordinate power in terms of how they interact with the economy, or even in a military scenario or a setting like that. I think we're a long way from that. And I actually agree with Alexandra that I think probably the best way that we can start to understand some of these dangers is to deploy these systems into production, because no one, the experts included, has any real idea of what this future of AI looks like. It is a really exciting and expansive space that we are looking in. But I think we are finding out, just even with ChatGPT, there are things that we didn't expect would be a problem, which are a problem, and some of our imagined fears haven't come to fruition just yet. So I believe that this pause would be unenforceable from an international perspective, and I also do not believe that it would reach its stated goals of trying to create these safety protocols. Now, if you look to the EU, they tried to regulate in the with an AI Act, and that they're still moving into this path. But when ChatGPT was released, they had to revise parts of the act.
Right.
So it just goes to show that we are building this future as we go.
And technology is always a few steps ahead of the law. We all know that. But Alexandra, go ahead. You were about to say something.
Yeah, I did just want to add on to something that Alex said, which I think is exactly right. One of the challenges that we have, and the reason that we haven't seen some of the progress that we would like to see within the standards and regulation space, is that it is just really challenging to develop testing methods, to develop metrics for these systems when they are developing and we don't know exactly to what point they're going to get. Now, we do need to be intentional in thinking about what we want this technology, the use cases for this technology to look like, how we want it to integrate into our lives, and how, at the end of the day, artificial intelligence should be an enabling technology. It should improve our lives in certain ways. It should increase efficiencies. It should make us more productive. So we do need to be intentional about the way that we're thinking about the way that we want to use it. But at the same time, we don't know the extent to where the technology should go. I think that within the letter, they've really leaned into some of the existential risk arguments that we are, as Alex noted, very far away from. I think that the technology still has a long way to go to achieve where some of the fears, I think, are really coming to fruition. So I think that it does require us to take a step back.
A step
and
back,
to
but
really
I
focus
mean,
on
the
testing.
case that's being made for safety is that there's just a need to test the technology before it's released to the public, similar to the way medicines and any other technology like the safety of cars are tested. I mean, is that possible, or would it take too long for clinical trials to work? I mean, would they even be able to
I
be
think
controlled properly? Okay, Alex, go
a
ahead.
good analogy, yeah, a good analogy there would be trying to design an airbag before you've even got your car on the road. And I think that that would be both impractical and it probably wouldn't give you the desired safety outcomes that you want to achieve. So to try and deploy this kind of technology or deploy safety systems around it before we even know what the systems look like in the real world would probably not be effective and not give us those safety controls that we desire. So I think my position here is probably at this point the most dangerous thing about AI is how people will abuse it, just the same as other technology systems that we have in the world that are capable of abuse.
Give me an example of how it could be abused and why people should be afraid of that.
Okay, so here's something that we could do today. So deep fakes are the ability to create the likeness of a person, an image of them, a video of them, or even cloning their voice. That technology is available today, and it's able to be done relatively cheaply with a small amount of expertise. Now, imagine if you gave this technology to a political party and a politician could then adjust their speech to every individual on a social media network depending on their particular interests and their particular political alignments. That's something that could happen today. And I think it would fool a large number of people into thinking that a political candidate was aligned with their viewpoints. So those kind of misinformation campaigns at scale could certainly be done as we speak today.
Right. Alexandra, let me come back to you because you were alluding to, the kind of good things people are expecting from artificial intelligence. So, I mean, we look at the best things that can happen. We've heard about this question that what if AI had a face and a body? If we look, for example, at the care of elderly people or in places with, high rates of depression, even loneliness, for example. In Japan, many find kind of decent replacements for human beings in relationships with ever-increasing human-like dolls and lifelike pets that are actually stuffed. These aren't actually real. So there you see the capacity for these things to even work as replacements for antidepressants and for company for our elderly, and when they can actually learn to function as a human being using their intelligence, they can do very important jobs.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I do think at the end of the day, there's not going to be a replacement for human touch, and there's going to be places that only humans really can perform. But I do think for simple functions like providing support, especially when we're seeing in a lot of populations, we're seeing aging populations, we're seeing birth rates decline. This would be able to fill a critical gap for people who do need more tailored attention. And artificial intelligence systems, because they're constantly being trained and updated based on what they learn with patterns, they can become more tailored to the specific individual. So I think that, and they can provide that sustained attention that individuals might need. So I think there are benefits within that case as well. And there's other benefits if you're talking about the health space as well. It's just the ability, as we're continuing to train AI models, to be able to discover diseases faster, to be able to read through data very, very quickly and to process that information. So I do think that there are a lot of positive benefits that we can harness. And we need to focus on that sometimes more than we focus on some of the existential risks.
Right.
While they are something that we do need to keep in mind and we do need to be thinking about those safety protocols, they are a long way off, and there are a lot of good things that we can harness if we focus on putting those safety measures in now, and we focus on building out in those areas where we think it would be productive for society.
Right. I mean, Alex, how optimistic are you about how good this technology could be, especially as it becomes potentially more and more human and can go along, with faces and bodies that can interact with human beings as a real human could?
Yes, so this is such a fascinating space. There's a movie called Her, which was a bit of a science fiction drama about a person who falls in love with an AI operating system that they talk to each other through a headset. Now, this kind of service is already available, and it covered a really interesting trajectory. It's called Replica, and they had a situation where people could sign up and talk with AI companions, and then they can also, for some time, engage in erotic role play with the companion. And people were forming very strong bonds with these artificial intelligence, these machines. Now, after some time, the Replica company took down that capability from the AIs because they couldn't guarantee that it wasn't being used by minors. They took it down from a safety perspective. But the users of the service were absolutely furious. They were saying that Replica had basically stolen a loved one from them. So certainly we will see AIs being used as companions for people. And that's a very multifaceted issue and worthy of discussion in its own right. But I think the biggest positive use case that I'm looking forward to is in education. So something that I'm really passionate about is the ability to provide a tutor for every child with artificial intelligence. And I think that we could move towards a future where teachers can think of these AIs as having 30 virtual assistants in the classroom. To me, that's a really exciting future. It would allow AI tutors to work with students, learn at their own pace, ensure that we don't move on to the next topic until everyone has mastered the previous topic. It's an absolute revolution of the way that we would look at the
Right.
classroom model.
That's amazing. And I mean, we were hoping earlier that the internet would help provide that, but it has to an extent. But I mean, especially in less monetarily advantaged districts, I'm going to say, a lot of kids aren't really reaping the benefits.
If you look at those metrics, it's really fascinating that technology hasn't delivered those benefits to education that we were expecting. So it is my great hope that we can use artificial intelligence to drive learning outcomes for everyone, regardless of their wealth or location.
I asked about worst case scenario. Alexandra, I mean, is that the best case scenario that we really wouldn't want to see paused right now? Children around the world in particular need better education. It's a struggle for almost every country on the planet.
Yeah, so I think that it is something that we do need to continue to invest in. And actually, the letter, I read it again today to see exactly what they were calling for. They weren't calling for a pause on all AI development. They are worried about these existential use cases. So I think there's a recognition about the power of AI. They need to continue investing. I think it's also important to remember that if we were to pause systems, that doesn't necessarily mean that actors all over the world are going to pause their AI development. So it may not even achieve its intended objective if not all actors are on the same page. And we're still seeing authoritarian nations moving forward and developing these capabilities, which could even pose an even bigger risk because they may not be thinking about the safety protocols that others might be wanting to bake into the processes.
Alex, just a minute for your final thoughts. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the real danger here is how humans use this technology rather than some existential crisis where the AI runs away, almost like a Skynet scenario. I think that we're a long, long way from that. I think that the real danger is that the power of this technology gets locked up with a small number of people, and the economic value that it unlocks, the benefits of that only go to a small number of corporations or nation states, or even highly wealthy individuals. So I think that we must all continue to work on the research, and in parallel, work on the safety controls as well.
Okay, Alex Jenkins and Alexandra Seymour. That will have to be the last word. I'd like to thank both of you really so much for being with us. Fascinating discussion on this edition of the Newsmakers. And I'll thank our viewers as well for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.